Hello, this is a start to a new podfic called Unfortunately for Society, Izuku is a Khanivore. Written by LouieTheDragon. Read by Stick. Summary. Midoriya Izuku was an odd child. Not only was he quirkless, but he was quirkless and still wanted to be a hero. He was constantly put down for it at every turn of his life, but still he reached for the stars, and yet there was a secret he's never told anyone. He likes to see his tormentors suffer. When he finally gives in to those urges after years of suppressing it, he discovers he does have a quirk. Unfortunately for society, there's a monster they created lurking in Tokyo. Chapter 1. The beginning of society's monster. I'm sorry, miss, but your son is quirkless. For so many years, that phrase had been the defining phrase of his life, as it was the base of his never-ending scorn from his peers and teachers, with the only exception being his mother. From playground bullies calling him names and shoving just a little too hard, are the ones in the gym locker room who beat him until he can't breathe properly for a few days. They were always there. He'd always wanted to become a hero. It's been his dream ever since he was able to understand the concept of heroes. But at every turn of his life, it's always been, quirkless scum like you can never even think of standing at the top, and other things like that. He never told his mother about the bullies, and enjoys watching them suffer, those who torment him. One day, back before middle school, his former best friend Kachan had finished his beating for the day, leaving Izuku covered in bruises and burns. They were only a few blocks away from their houses, as they were neighbors. Izuku kept his difference by about 20 feet. He saw Mitsuki open the front door and ask him where he's been. He grumbled a non-coherent response, which led to a slap across the face from Mitsuki. Once he saw that, he was overcome with a feeling of euphoria, and despite the pain he was in, started giggling under his breath. He quickly got home and gave the usual clumsy excuse he'd always used. He got to his room and locked the door. Quickly he replayed the image over in his head, hands clutching his face like a crazed maniac. It was a never-ending stream of such a nice feeling. His body was hot, like he'd been eating something spicy. Izuku dropped his hands from his face. He felt something hard, and it was like his pants had tightened. He looked down to see himself fully hard. He slightly shifted and gasped at the pleasure that raced through his body. He quickly ran to the bathroom to relieve himself. After about 10 minutes of stewing over what happened, he suddenly felt nauseous. This isn't what a hero is supposed to do, he thought to himself. He felt like a sicko. He couldn't believe he got off on that. It wasn't that particular event that necessarily became the turning point. However, it did make Izuku notice something peculiar. Once he got into middle school, the bullying and baiting got worse. There was never a day where he didn't come home with bruises and lacerations from the other kids' quirks. They slammed him against the wall, against lockers. They cornered him everywhere, whether the bathroom, the hallway, the schoolyard. He never got a break from the torture. His mother eventually stopped asking, knowing she wouldn't get an answer out of her son anytime soon. He still went to villain and hero fights, and still took analysis of the hero's quirk, breaking them down and figuring out how they work. It was like this for the next few years, as a routine almost. Sometimes he'd think he'd hear a noise in an alley he walked past on a peculiar day, and when he got there would always be nothing but a faint smell of copper that made his skin tingle. He fought down what he thought was a revolting urge and usually went on his way. There was only one discrepancy in this routine, and that was the one time when he was 12. He was going a different route than usual, and there was an injured cat lurking through the alleyway. He doesn't quite remember what came over him, but it happened in a flash. He lunged at the cat, biting down on it, enough to draw blood. The cat thrashed, but Izuku's grip was firm. After a few more seconds, he had drained the cat of its blood. It didn't feel quite right, however. It felt like there was something he was missing. He soon let go of the cat, scrambling back and looking at his bloody hands, startled, yet not quite terrified as he should be. He pushed the event out of his mind, refusing to even acknowledge it. However, one day, a few years later, it was his scream. He was walking through the usual underpass that was on his way home from school. There was a faint clank, and suddenly his mouth was full of disgusting sludge. "Look at that, a nice medium-sized invisibility cloak. This is perfect, kid. Thanks a million. You're my hero." "No," he thought, as his eyes closed, but in that moment he decided how could he be someone's hero if he can't even save himself. Before he can do anything, however, there was a gust of wind and the invading sludge was forced out of his system. He coughed and hacked the remnants of sewage when a hand entered his vision. His coughing slowed as he gazed up at the owner of the hand. When he saw All Might, he thought he might have started screaming, or maybe asked for his autograph, but no. Izuku just stood there with unseeing eyes until a single thought passed through. Can someone without a quirk be a hero? The brilliant grin that showed on his idol's face dimmed, and seemed more and more fake. Then he stood there, arms still outstretched. Izuku knew that what he spouted on TV about everyone can be a hero was a lie. "I'm sorry, my boy, but this situation should be enough to know you can't. I'm sorry." All Might seemed to hesitate for a moment. "But you could always be a police officer or detective. That's an honorable job as well." With that, he flew off into the distance, having apprehended the villain while Izuku was still comprehending the situation. He'd always said that the incident before middle school wasn't the turning point, but instead, he thought it was the start of a long catalyst. It was starting to get dark out, and he thought his mom would worry if he came home late. He grabbed the backpack he had dropped when the villain had grabbed him. It was slightly scorched, but nothing he hadn't seen before. His mother greeted him when he got home. He told her he was going to bed early and to not bother him, please. Once Izuku got to his room, he opened his computer and put on his paid-off effort of having a lot of free time over the year from a lack of friends. He hesitated, with his hand over the keyboard. Did he really want to do this? Load the security cam so he can go out and enjoy the pleasure he's been bottling up for so long? Yes. Access granted appeared across his screen, and the cams were now set to a 6-hour loop. That seemed like enough time to get his work done. He changed out of his middle school uniform and put a pair of black jeans and nondescript black hoodie that he once bought in hopes that he can blend in. It didn't work. Concealer to mask his freckles and some jet black contacts, again nondescript. He waited approximately 1 hour until he was sure his mother had gone to bed, poked out his head as he cracked his door. No mother in sight. He put to use his stealth skills gained after many years of torment. He went up to the knife block and pulled out the second largest knife. He went back to his room, closed and locked the door before placing pillows under his covers, opening the window, and climbing out into the night air. He stuck to dark alleys and security camera blind spots until he made it to the block where he looped the cameras. From there, he waited nearly 30 minutes until his first victim wandered into his line of sight. Oh, even better. It was his own teacher. What a coincidence. Izuku grabbed the man by the collar of his shirt and yanked him into the dark alleyway, covering his mouth with his gloved hand to prevent him from screaming. He then dragged the man further into the depths. Izuku dropped the man onto the ground without care. He went around behind him and put the knife to his throat. Everyone here wants to be heroes, huh, Sensei? The man's expression changed to a mixture of confusion and terror. Well, wait, you're one of my students? Which one? Whatever I've done to you, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Izuku's grin looked manic, and he spoke softly. What have you done? Oh, no, Sensei. His voice turned low and menacing. It's what you haven't done. Small giggles escaped the boy, and he gripped his knife tighter against his sensei's jaw. He could see the teacher tense up and try desperately to figure out who it was. Your time's up. The knife loosened slightly, but not enough for the man to escape. Sensei. He spoke with a happy-go-lucky chime in his voice. I've always been so positive, no? Always trying to achieve my goals, yet I can never do it. Why? His teacher seemed to come to a realization, making him squirm in the teen's arms. Izuku stood over the man's body, looking him in the eye and leaning down close to his face in a crouch. He bent down toward the teacher's ear and spoke. It was because I was the useless, quirkless Deku. He didn't give the man any time to respond before he plunged the knife through his throat. The man was choking on his own blood, and Izuku felt the pleasure course through his veins at the sight. He took some of the blood and licked it off his fingers. Izuku shivered as he savored the sweet coppery taste, with his eyes shining as the man went lifeless. His mouth watered, and he felt something in his mind compel him to indulge in this feeling, this urge. He bent down onto the man's slit throat and drank. Pleasure like he'd never felt ran down his spine, and a gasp left his lips, followed by a moan. All of those almost moments were nothing compared to this. As he gulped the blood eagerly, he felt his body grow slightly. His muscles got bigger and his nails got sharper, as did his teeth, and his tongue grew a little longer. After he all but sucked the corpse dry, Izuku stood, and an idea struck him. He took some of what was left of the man's blood and wrote the letter Q on the brick wall. He wiped all evidence of him being there besides the man's body and using his newfound strength to get home faster. He knew he was covered in blood, so he decided to climb through his window once more and clean up his trail and take a shower, thanking whatever deity out there that his mom was a deep sleeper. He took his outfit off and washed the makeup off his face. He got into and stayed in the shower until the water was clear of red. Now, Izuku stood bare in only boxers in front of his mirror. He was checking to make sure he wasn't imagining things, and no, he wasn't. The edges of his teeth had indeed gotten a tad bit sharper. Same thing with his muscles. They had gotten bigger. Not enough to be outwardly noticeable, no, but enough that Izuku could tell the difference. Izuku stuck out his tongue to the mirror and was shocked to find it was indeed longer as well. Where he could barely reach the bottom of his nose, it now reached the tip. With these changes, he can only assume this was his quirk? The implications of what this means he's no longer quirkless. This thought made something of a cackle bubble up his throat. He couldn't tell Kacchan because he'll have to explain why it happened.